Yes.
Yes, we're live. Kenny Casanova. Technical difficulties on my end.
I have
blame
two
that on Kenny,
devices
though.
going. Two devices going.
That's
and
a
you said you
great
couldn't
way
hear
to,
either one of them.
That's a great way to A/B test it.
Yeah, we figured out a new thing. I also want to say this up here is very nice. What do you think?
Yeah, I love it, man. Thanks for
I
doing
think
it
it
for me.
looks smooth with no square. Look how smooth that is.
Yeah, no, it looks great.
Yeah.
And we're on the COVID. We're on the wrestling bookmarks page as well.
Okay. Hello, Mom.
Oh, look.
Hello. Look. I should have put that shirt on. Damn, it's downstairs. I'll put it on later.
That's why I was saying. I think a hat would be. I was thinking about rocking a trucker hat that said COVID Con.
That would be cool. You want the logo? I'll send it to you. You could probably put it on something somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to make hats up forever. It just costs a lot of money unless you know somebody in Thailand.
No.
So I wanted to get you on again because the last time I wasn't able to, it just wasn't the same. It's a different format now where it's more one-on-one, and we got the YouTube feed going.
Yes.
But I did want to talk more about the books that you've written with, let's see, Kenny Casanova, Kamala, Brutus Beefcake, Vader, Tito Santana, Danny Davis. Am I missing anybody?
And Sabu. So that would be another generation one that you probably weren't as much in, but maybe some.
Yeah, well, he was more ECW. He was ECW,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably a little more after I probably got out of it. But so you were in the wrestling business, right? You were a manager.
Yep.
Now, did you ever want to be a wrestler before you? Like, I wanted to be a wrestler when I was 9, and then I stopped growing, and I'm like, well, I'm probably never going to be a wrestler.
Yeah, I mean, I went and I actually trained for it. I like the idea of doing the personality stuff. I think it was smart in knowing that I wasn't like going to be, the next Hulk Hogan or some, something big, because I was 5'11". And while that might be big now in wrestling, it wasn't then. It's not even all that big now. But I mean, back then when I was big into watching it as a kid, WWF was known as the land of the giants, and everybody was like, you had to be like 6'3", 6'5" or more, 250 pounds, and I wasn't any of that. I was $185 soaking wet with a brick in my pocket. And so I started going to wrestling school with a buddy of mine who was at a comic store with me. And we started going together, and they actually told me I bumped too crisp when I was taking the classes. They're like, you got to be sloppy like Bobby Heenan. You can't look like you're a wrestler. You got to look more like crazy bumps, like all messy. So I had to readjust after I had learned. I actually took all the wrestling classes, learned as much of it that I could, and then I was told I needed to readapt. And once in a while I would do some tag matches with guys, or like, mixed, it'd be like 2 wrestlers and me, their manager, versus whoever, Bam Bam Bigelow kicking my ass or whatever.
Right. So, now, did you play sports in high school at all?
Just football, and poorly. So yeah.
Little football. Okay, yeah, because I played football and baseball, and I couldn't imagine wanting to get in there and take body slams.
Yeah, I wasn't.
That doesn't look like it hurts.
Yeah. I mean, so, but they liked that I could do voices. I sort of did like impersonations of other guys. I could do a ring announcer impersonation, which eventually they just said, "Can you ring announce sometimes?" And almost like a lot of the guys you see, like Jim Cornette and different people, they started out doing something else. They had to get their foot in the door somehow, So I trained to wrestle, but I also did the other stuff. So I would do ring announcing, and we would come early, set up the ring, put the chairs up, try to sell tickets and do merchandise stuff, help the guys out, help the stars sell stuff, sit next to them and take pictures for people, so whatever you could do, to get your foot in the door.
Now, what was the first time where you met someone that you may have looked up to when you were younger? Like as a manager or in the wrestling industry.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the first shows with a name would probably be Bam Bam Bigelow. Soon after that, King Kong Bundy.
Okay.
I'll tell you a good mark out story if that's what makes you laugh. We were doing a show in Delhi, New York, and me and the guy, his name's Pete. We called him Sweet Pete. the Bushwhackers were there, and their vests. They had their vests hanging up on the wall, and we wanted to get pictures with the Bushwhackers vests on, going like this, right? You know, trying to look like the Bushwhackers.
Right.
So just before we did that, I put Sergeant Slaughter's hat on, and Doink the Clown, which was Ray Apollo Doink. He was kind of like the third Doink in WWE. I put his jacket on with Sergeant Slaughter's hat. We took a picture of that. I put on Tom Brady, Sal Sincere's jacket. Then I put the Bushwhackers vests on, and they started to come back. We're like, oh shit! So we quick threw the vests in lockers because we couldn't put them back where they belonged. And the Bushwhackers came in. They're like, whoa! They're like, mate, where did they put our vests? And we couldn't say anything. We didn't want it because we were the wrestlers, you know, backstage. We didn't want to say we were marking out putting your vests on, you know. So there was a period of time where Luke and Butch were like walking around the locker room going, damn it, where are they put our vests? And Luke is like, they're gone, mate. They're gone. Like somebody stole them. And we're like, we didn't want to be the ones to say, dude, we were marking out and put your vests on. They're right there, you know, because it's super disrespectful. Super, you know,
yeah,
you're gonna get thrown out of the locker room or whatever. You know, we just put them on for a second. They were just sitting there, and we had to quick get them off of us, and we weren't near that spot. So eventually, we were like, Luke, we found him. They put him in the locker. So here, and he's like, oh, thank you, mate. That's awesome, mate. Yeah, you know, and. But all along, we were the ones that kind of like misplaced them because we were.
That's so funny.
Yeah, so,
that's a great story.
I'm not even sure that we have that. We didn't get a picture of the Bushwhackers vest because we didn't have them on long enough. We put them on. We were getting ready because he had to take them with Polaroids, right? Because we didn't have cell phone cameras, you know, at that point. So anyhow, but I do have, if I dug really deep, I do have the picture of me wearing the Doink the Clown and the Sergeant Slaughter hat, because they were just gimmicks all on a table. They were just kind of thrown there in a corner. So we just started putting them on to take pictures and stuff, you know. So I've not told that story ever before. I hope that doesn't get me heat with the Bushwhackers, especially
you know,
I'm helping somebody produce their book now.
You know what's so funny is, as a fan or a mark, that I always think of the weirdest things when it comes to wrestling. I'm like, why wouldn't guys like Bam Bam Bigelow? He's around guys like Rick Rude, Hogan, guys who are in great shape. Like, why didn't he ever just want to get complete, you know, get jacked like that, right? I mean, he had
because lasagna tastes so delicious.
I know. That's probably one reason, right? But you figured he'd have like nowadays, you just wouldn't see that. I don't think. Like most of the guys now are in pretty great shape.
Yeah, you know, it seems like, if you want to call it the evolution of the sport, that's what they say all the time now. That's the term, is to be more, I don't want to say athletic, but to be more cosmetic in their build, right? Athletic would sort of be a term that you would use to say that I'm a better athlete than you. I don't know that they're better athletes per se, but they're definitely more bodybuilder physique type, and they're more acrobatic, flip around kind of stuff, you know. But at the same time, there were guys that have been unparalleled back then. You know, people just can't touch them today. You know, it was like Ultimate Warrior and you know, whatever. So as far as appearance,
I mean, sometimes I feel bad trying to compare, like, you know, the golden era to today.
Yeah,
but
I didn't know that you can.
I think the first Survivor Series. I think I was watching the first Survivor Series the other night.
Yep.
And if you look at the colors of the outfits the guys are wearing compared to today, I mean, the color schemes are
bright.
Yes, right? It's incredible, and it draws you in. Whereas now, there's a lot of guys who I can't really tell the difference between, because I feel like they just dress the same. They have the same long hair.
Right. And I guess you know, if I could book a promotion today to make it look different, I would say nobody can wear black and red. And then what would happen then? You know what I mean? Because that's pretty much everything. If you think everybody's got at least black on, you know, somewhere. And the ones who don't are the ones who are really sticking out because they're not wearing black. Think of if you went through WWE's roster right now, I could probably only name one or two people that don't have black somewhere on their costume. Right? Yeah.
You're right.
And that's why maybe that new guy, I don't watch it enough to remember his name. I've kind of shut it off lately. Is it Otis, right? The heavy machinery guy?
Yes.
Otis?
Yeah.
Otis?
Otis, yeah.
He doesn't have the body that the other guys do, and bang,
like
he looks different than everybody else, so he's special, right? So
Yeah.
not to say we should go out there and just pound Chinese food until we get large, but to get a push. But he looks different, and that's maybe why he's standing out and being forced to be pushed now. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be behind the scenes and see whose call that is.
Yeah.
As far as what the costumes that they're the outfits that they're wearing.
Right.
So when you started getting into writing the books and everything, did you reached out to Kamala first, right? Is that how that happened?
Right. So almost, I would say, 15 years after I started doing wrestling. So
okay.
I had played Kimchi a number of times in the Northeast for him, as did other people. The big people, I like to point this out too. The person that a lot of people remember is Steve Lombardi, because he was the one on WWE. But there was a guy named Frank Dalton in Memphis that did it a lot. There was another guy named, and it evades me. Kamala didn't like that one in Mid-South. I'll think of it in a minute. There were 3 really well-known ones. And then it was just a lot of different people in WWE here and there. And then in independents, there were a bunch of them. I was one of them. So, but he liked mine because my costume was pretty meticulous. Like, I tried to make it look exactly like the one you saw on WWE TV.
Okay.
So there are other guys, that would always bother me. You see the pants didn't match the jacket, or the mask was off, or the hat just looked like crap, or looked like a costume or whatever. So, I mean, if you're going to do it, you should really do it right and try to look like it. Same as a doink. If you ever saw that fat doink that wrestles in the Ponderosa,
right,
parking lot or whatever, you're like, something's not right there. You know what I mean? So that was the idea. And that's why, and it's a good move to do that if you're going to take on a role, to really look the part, because Kamala would request me. He'd say, hey, can you use that Kenny guy you used last time? Can you be my Kimchi this time? And I'd be like, yeah, bring me in, and I'd do Kenny Casanova 2 or 3 spots, and then I'd come out with Kamala, usually as a face on the independents, as
right.
Kimchi. So I was working 2 characters a lot, So
I know I probably told you that I met Kamala. I went to a show that he was at. They had like an autograph signing, but Kimchi was there. I'm wondering if it was you. It was in Revere, Massachusetts.
It could have been
2000, maybe like 2004, 2005.
Wow, totally could have been. What?
He was with George the Animal Steel. That's what I remember.
That's who he wrestled.
Yeah. He wrestled George the Animal Steel. Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's possible. I remember doing a show out that area where it was Kamala was on the show and Vader was also on the show.
Oh, okay.
And there was a lot of names there that night. Sandman was there, and the New Age Outlaws. I remember specifically that one. The one that you're talking about? I don't know. Maybe. Do I still have it? Yeah, it's down in the basement.
You gonna break it out one night?
I could go grab it if you want. Sometimes it's funny. If you go to the Kamala page, every once in a while, he'll send me a stack of 8x10s, and he might have a new one in there. And I sell them on his website because I'm also his webmaster. He called me the last real Kimchi because I'm still kind of like, promoting him and pushing his stuff. I'll put the whole gear on, and I'll do like an infomercial kind of like thing. And I'll be like, oh, you can get the new 8x10. And I have the hat on and the mask, and I do the whole thing. And people are like, what the hell? I should do that again. I'll pull it out for the bookmarks thing, and we'll plug the Kamala thing in gear. It'll be funny. Let me ask too. I see a few people writing up questions. This setup that I'm doing now, I keep trying different setups, and I've had this one, but I found out it's not the setups for me to sound good on this, and I want to sound good for COVID Con because we're going to be on Fight TV soon too. This is June 14th coming up.
Yep.
Let me ask the people, does this sound good? Does it sound like quality? Does it sound better than Ed's? Same as Ed's? Lesser than equal to Ed's? Let me know, because he just got a new mic too, right?
Yeah. Yep.
What's that one called?
The Snowball.
The Snowball. You don't have to tell us why. It does sound good? Okay. No stuttering, no like missing feeds here. We know why Eddie likes the Snowballs, but we're not going to talk about that. But this is the Blue Yeti, and this is the same one that Steve Austin uses, and I heard him say it once. So
okay.
I'm like, well, his always sounds good.
I was between the two.
See that? Let me see. It's very phallic. It's very Freudian, Mike.
Yeah.
But
Now, where did you get? Now, did you just get that?
No, I've had it. I've got two
Oh,
of
you've
them.
had it.
I just
Okay.
don't usually set it all up. But what I was about to say, and I cut myself off when we got talking about the mic, was that I found it's not entirely the setup; it's where I'm setting up. I'm setting up upstairs right now, and I get a better reception. I'm also using a Verizon hotspot box instead of my home Wi-Fi. So that's a test tonight. Cool. All right. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, a bunch of people saying it sounds good. So
all right. So that's what I'll do in the future. But the thing is, I got to convince my wife to go downstairs and me to go upstairs in the primetime spot. So that doesn't always work. But what can you do?
She doesn't want to go hang out with all the wrestling figures?
No, see, usually the way that works too is like whenever I get a new one, I try to only buy one guy of the new guys if I'm going to do that. I haven't done it even all that many years, but there's a big ceremony. So when a new person comes in, all of them rejoice and they all, so she walks in there, they just act ridiculous and she hates that. So because you know how wrestlers are when they get around cute girls. So she feels out of space. So she doesn't like to go down in that room.
I just went on a little bit of a buying spree myself. I got to finish this collection behind me. So
I did buy. We had them last COVID con. 2 posters. I just posted them. I don't know if I put them on the bookmarks page, but we had that guy that talked about Wildman, the bear guy that used to bring the bears on matches. Yep. So that guy got me in contact with a collector that had some posters for sale. I got 2 really cool posters. One of Andre the Giant up in that Canadian promotion, and one of the Sheik.
Really? So, who was that? Was that Wes Maidmont? Was that who that was?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So he got me in contact to them. And pretty cool piece of history, like really old.
Yeah, that's great.
Pretty nifty.
No,
that's great. What I bought after the last COVID con. I kind of marked out to that guy's setup. If you remember, behind him he had like 50 posters all lined up of
right.
And I had been in his wrestling Wildman fan page on Facebook group or whatever for a couple of years. And I always liked his little stories and stuff. And that's why we invited him on. And I thought it was super cool, like everything he had to say. So I marked out and wanted a poster. So I started looking for him.
Yeah, that's great, man. So when you back to the Kamala stuff. So when you started writing his book, did you approach him with the idea? Like, hey, maybe you should write a book? And what was his initial thought?
Yeah, so it went like this kind of I had read in the wrestling news that he unfortunately lost both of his legs to diabetes, didn't have a whole lot of money. And I was like, oh, geez, that sucks. He was a super nice guy to me. I had remember hearing stories of him having a kimchi who would help him, on a show. And I think this was a Dan Murphy kimchi, Dan Murphy was the PWI 500 guy that was also on our last COVID con. He was the guy that for many years would lay out PWI 500. He played kimchi a couple times in the Rochester, New York. So Western New York. He had a pretty good costume too. He had said, he volunteered to do it. He wasn't really getting paid anything. And Kimchi paid him, not Kimchi, Kamala paid him out of his pocket to help sell pictures during intermission and gave him half of the money, which was pretty cool because that's what the promoter should be doing, But when the talent decides to do it just because he knows it makes his character look better presentation, that says a lot for it. So anyhow, I knew he was a cool dude. I had worked a lot with him. So when I had heard he lost both legs, I'm like, geez, he's screwed now. He's not going to be able to make much of any, appearances. And it's true. He can't fly all that well. He hasn't in years now. He just can't get around. So I was right in that. So I contacted him. I said, hey, I've got a sci-fi book. I got like a Back to the Future type book, almost like Back to the Future Groundhog Day type book coming out soon. What if I don't push that and put that aside and we do your autobiography and I'll just give you all the money and you can use it to help you with medical costs? He's like, it sounds like a good idea, Kenny, but I've been screwed by promoters in the past and it's nothing personal. I know we work together, but I want to run it by my buddy. He's kind of my financial advisor. I think I told this story before because you're like smiling, right? Yeah. so I'm like, all right, who's that? So he gives me the number and I call it up and And oh dear, it's Coco Beware. And I'm talking to Coco, and Coco just said something like, "Now, Kenny, I want to tell you, if you do it, you gotta picture like this is your grandfather, this is your granddaddy, and you got to be good to him. You can't mess with him. You know, if you're gonna say you're gonna help him, don't use that as a front just to get the deal and not give him money for the book." You know, I said, "Of course. I mean, that's what we're doing. And that's what we did." And he made like 60 grand.
Now, do you know Coco? Do you know Coco at this point or no?
Yeah, we're pretty close. I mean, I booked him for the last COVID con, and
no, I mean, when you first talked to him, when you're talking to Kamala, did
we
you know him or not?
We'd worked some together here and there, but not that well. I knew Kamala more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was weird to get that, information that I need to call Coco Beware, his financial advisor.
Right. So then when you're doing the book with Kamala, because I've heard all the stories, is it hard for you knowing him, personally? Obviously you thought enough of him that you called him up and offered to help write his book. Was it hard for you hearing some of the stories, like how, maybe how he grew up and the hardships that he had?
Yeah, it was sad because back then in those days, just like midgets and just like the female wrestler, there was one spot on a card for a black guy. That's just how it worked. And especially where he lived out in Mississippi area, the good old boys, it was pretty much like whole card of white guys, one black guy, maybe a midget guy, maybe a girls match, probably not. But if they could get him, it was an attraction. So he had to actually kind of, what's the term? Be competitive with other, other wrestlers of color, just to get a spot. So it sucked, you know what I mean? And that's why like he didn't get along too well with like Abdullah the Butcher and different people. Like when they went over to Japan, because it was almost the same thing overseas. So I'd hear some of those stories and they sucked. Another one that would kind of choke me up was Vader's. Later on, some of his stuff with the substance abuse upset me a little bit when I was writing it.
Yeah.
He started to take on like a fatherly grandfather role, like feeling when I would talk to him, like you're talking to like a grandfather kind of thing. And my grandfather's growing up passed away when I was a little kid. So like older figure like that, trying to give me advice and stuff like that. So both of those, I had those kind of moments a little bit when I was writing it where something would, I wouldn't say I'd bawl, but I'd get a little bit like,
Right. Now, do you ever meet them in person while you're doing it, or is everything done over email and over the phone?
A lot of it's over the phone. So when I do, almost all of it's been over the phone, though I've had opportunities where they'd say, come meet me. And I did with Vader. With Kamala, I met him almost when it was done, after it was done. I went down and met with him and we did a Kickstarter thing to launch that just to put some hype on it. And I went down and I brought a guy down who threw in a lot of money to it and had a dinner with him. We went to a Texas Brazil steakhouse where they bring out meat on these sticks and they push them down on your plate. And it's a pretty cool ordeal. And Kamala, being kind of like the hillbilly that he is, he'd be like, this is some of the best meat I ever had, Kenny, but I wonder if they got rabbit. And I'm like, dude, rabbit? So that was fun. And I went down to Dallas when we were finishing up Vader's, one of his rewrites, and hung out with Vader after he had left. Where did he live? Colorado, right? Boulder? Where did he live?
That sounds like Colorado. Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah. And he moved to Dallas. So when he lived in the Rocky Mountains. Like there was a whole thing on WCW, and it was pretty much true. That's where he did live. But anyhow, he went to Dallas after he got the diagnosis that he had 2 years to live, and his son was trying to keep him healthy and stuff. And they did pretty well, but when it came down to it, he only made it 18, 19 months after the 2 years to live diagnosis. And he did the best he could. He worked some with DDP. We helped connect him to him. He tried to make good with everything. So that's why we kind of rewrote the book. He had a couple of sections that we rewrote because he didn't want to think that maybe he would pass and not have said something that he could have fixed something bad, against somebody or what have you. So that thing went over a lot of rewrites, probably 4 years. It took to write that book. It took forever. So I started that immediately after I finished Kamala's.
Mm-hmm.
It went Kamala to Vader, but Vader's was in the works. Then I did Beefcake's book, and then Danny Davis, and then Vader's finally came out as I was finishing Sabu's, and then it was like Sabu and Vader's book came out at the same time, and it blew people's minds. Like, how do you write 2 books together? It didn't really work like that, but that's what happened behind the scenes.
So when you were doing Vader's book, he found out, he got the news while you were writing the book?
Yeah, I mean, actually, he got the news when we were done. Like, we finished it, and then he was like, he calls me up, and I remember I was at an Applebee's with one of the referees and another manager, a buddy of mine named Marty the Party. The only guy that I really trained, if you want to say trained, I helped another guy become a manager and taught him all the spots and drove around. He kind of was like my mentoree or whatever. And Vader calls up one night, and he's like, "Oh man, I got to tell you," he's like, "went in the doctors today, and they said I got 2 years to live." And I'm like, "What?" Because I got excited, so I thought he was like calling me while I was with my friends to tell me, let's put the book out. I finished the last draft. I was waiting for him to say, "Thumbs up, let's put it out."
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that. It was, we got to rewrite some more stuff because now everything's changed. And it made sense because now there's a whole chapter of what is it like to know you have an expiration date and you know when it is. And now what do we do from here, to make good with anything last unfinished business? Because you think of that, if you were told you're going to die 6 weeks from now, what would you have to do? I mean, you probably have all these things you want to finish. You want to get stuff ready for your wife and for your kids, and you might want to go back to people maybe if you have one or two of them, friends out there that maybe you've been estranged to for whatever dumb reason, that type of thing. So he had a bunch of that stuff going on. And at the same time, he thought maybe there was a chance he could beat it. So he tried a number of things to try to beat it, getting more healthy, eating better, trying some of that DDP yoga stuff. And some of that stuff probably did help. Who knows? I mean, if he didn't do a lot of that stuff, maybe he would have only made it 6 months. So who knows, So I would imagine it did help. But I don't, the doctors told him he was kind of too late by the time he got his diagnosis. And he didn't believe them. He didn't want to believe them, as nobody would. So he tried to fight against that idea, and it actually made him angry. I know he argued with doctors over the idea, but the best he could, And I mean, he had the foresight to set things up with his son, so his son could write a little bit for the end of the book. We had him sign these labels so he could put them in the book, what do you call it? Fans could get autographed copies in case he were not to make it by the time the book came out. And that is what happened, which was weird. So when I went to Dallas, I gave him these little labels that, for the signature and stuff like that. And he said, he's like, this is sort of like going to jinx me. And he didn't do it the first day. And then he signed him the next day or something like that. But smart, to think, if I'm going to be gone, what do I need to do to dot my I's and cross my T's kind of thing. And that's what the last couple chapters dealt with that we added to the book. And then we went back and dressed up different things within the book that he wanted to leave as a, finished business kind of thing.
Now, how do you process that information? Obviously you got probably close to him when you're writing the book, and then he calls you up with that news.
It was startling, and the thing about it, though, was after a year or so of knowing it was coming, when he finally did pass, I was sad, but I knew I had so long to know that it was coming that it wasn't like, oh my God, this is horrible. You know what I mean? We had been preparing and knew it was coming at some point. And he had a, what's the term? He had a habit of going dark, almost, I guess is the best way to say it. Going dark. Like he'd disappear for a couple of weeks and do his thing. We wouldn't talk for a month sometimes. If I call him, he wouldn't call me right back. And, there was a few times I remember I was in Memphis for something, an autograph. Was it Memphis? I went down and saw, yeah, I was at Memphis for something, and I was at Graceland, and finally he calls me up. I was the first time I was ever seen Elvis stuff, at Graceland. I'm a little bit of an Elvis mark, and he calls me up after me not talking to him probably for like 3 months, and he's like, he's like, Kenny, it's Leon. I'm like, oh, dude, what's going on, man? And he's like, listen, I got to tell you. He's like, if I don't call you back for a little while, don't be worried that like the project ain't happening. It's still happening. We're just not working on it right now because I don't want to work on it. And I'm like, all right, because I had left him probably like 3 or 4 messages like, are we still doing this? Are we done? I haven't heard from you in like 3 months. I didn't realize that he would go dark, and I'm kind of in that right now with a guy that I'm doing a book for right now. We're dark, and I sent him some messages. He kind of kayfabed, and then finally he writes back something like, no, continue to write it, and I said, we can wait a year and come back to this then if you want. I know you're super busy right now. You're running around with COVID and trying to control WWE behind the scenes, and but if we get back to this in a year when stuff is a little bit more stable, you want me to still write during the meantime some here and there? He's like, yeah, keep writing. But mostly now I get thumbs up or an emoji, and that's about it from that guy right now. Yeah. So we'll get back to his in a little bit. But
okay. Well, do you you've had the opportunity to put someone's story out there, right? That's going to be there for forever, right? Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's why you want to get it right the best you can, and something that I try to do, and I would encourage other wrestler authors to do if they don't, is to try to take the book on and make it read like a novel more so than a historical account of results and places that we've been to and a summary and a cliff note of things that happened. I try to add the 5 senses in wherever I can. I want you to hear, I want you to smell, I want you to taste, I want you to feel. I want you to feel like you're in the locker room and you can see everything happening around you and what the place looked like and what it would look like on a movie screen or something like that. More so than I went to the Providence Civic Center on July 15th of 1987. This person was there. This person was there. This person was there. We had a match and I won. You know what I mean? That no one wants to read something like that. So, and I think we're getting better and better and better as far as some of the wrestling authors that we have now trying to give you a flavor of art with some of the wrestling books more so than just historical facts. If that makes sense. So that's what I try to do.
When you did the Brutus and Tito books, both which are phenomenal,
Thank you.
When you're reading it, it really does sound. You can hear their voices,
right? And right? That's something that's cool. That mostly happens with wrestling books. I think it doesn't happen as much with other stuff, but it's because of promos, and it's because all the characters that we're talking about. So the moment that Dusty Rhodes walks in on a scene, what he sounds like. I don't have to say to you, and he said in his southern accent, brother, I'm funky like a monkey and I swing it, whatever he would say, right? You've got it already. So I think it's a neat thing with wrestling books that the fans have a preconceived voice in their head that we can tap into, and then you're there. You know what I mean? So another thing you'll notice with my books, lots of dialogue. I try to recreate, like I'll say to the wrestler, I know you're not going to remember the conversation, but if you could remember the conversation, what did it sound like? Like what was said in there? Try to throw me a little bit of what that dial, and we'll recreate it the best we can. I put a little disclaimer under some of the conversations where we might have tried to guess the best we can, but usually people tell me I'm pretty close. So now when you're reading all that dialogue, you're hearing the voice, and you're even more now in that locker room with the wrestlers as the story's unfolding. So that's something else that I do. I'm not giving you all my secrets, people listening, but that's what it is. So somebody else is saying the same thing. Cool. And I'm not a great writer. You go through Beefcake, you'll find some grammatical errors here and there. And I usually leave that the best as I can to a cheap editor, and the cheap editor blows it off and takes my money, and I miss stuff. So, but the stuff that I'm telling you, the tips and all, That's all legit. I'm an English teacher, so I've studied writing, and I teach 12th grade English too now. This is what I always tell kids that they should do to make the story interesting. So,
well, I did want to know, when you were doing the Tito book, how did you know where to put the Arribas?
all right, so that's another.
Because when I was reading, I'm like, how does Kenny know where to put the Arribas?
Yeah. So I just decided that as an ongoing gag, it would be funny to tell kind of grandpa bad jokes here and there. And when you did, hit the Arriba, right?
Right.
And that's what I did. So when I write the books too, another element that you're bringing out of my writing style is to always look for the funny. And I tried to find fun even in like sections of books that had no fun, because I wanted to bring people up for a second. Something to be said for an emotional roller coaster where you kind of get them up here, funny, bring them down, make them sad, bring them up, something nostalgic. So kind of up and down, up and down. That's kind of the move. And finding like the Arriba sections is something to kind of spice it up and keep you reading and laughing a little bit. Even in sections that might not had humor, I'd throw a punchline in there, punch it up a little. So.
Yeah, no, I thought that book, I thought it was funny. I was definitely laughed a few times in it.
Cool.
So was it? So that book, I think Tito said it took 2 years to write that book. Was that about right?
Sounds about right. Yeah, 1.5 years. See, the thing was, I wasn't totally done with it. What happened was I came across his original book, and his original book was only about 125, 150 pages, real small, and it didn't live up to today's standards of what a wrestling autobiography has become. It was sort of also in kayfabe, like it would say, brother, I tried my hardest that night and I tried to win the match, but I just fell short. And I didn't quite have what I needed to have in order to beat Cowboy Bob Orton that night. And geez, I do not a bad Tito Santana. That's probably the first time I've tried to do his voice. So, but anyhow, his book then was written in a way that they were still protecting the business, and people don't want that today because the rabbit is already out of the hat. The people know that, it's wrestling's not 100% what it claims to be through the commentator's mic. So that book didn't hold up anymore. And also the company that wrote the book was gone. They went out of business. So he had no books of his own. It wasn't that great. It was kind of disorganized. It was a little all over the place. So I took a few of the stories out of it, rewrote them, told him first to retell the stories again now, did some research, added some stuff to it. But then from those stories, that was probably like maybe 50 pages of stories worth of stuff in the new book. And then I went and added another 350 pages of other stuff to it from what I got out of Tito, and new stuff, him being a teacher to himself now. He's a Spanish teacher. Just stuff that happened after he left WWE that wasn't in there. So that's how it worked. So I looked a little bit at the old book, but we didn't use a lot of it.
Okay.
And you couldn't either. You couldn't just lift it. That would be plagiarism too. So.
Well, that brings me to my next question. So let's just say, what happens? Because you have to self-publish these, right? So what happens 30 years from now when my kid's like, oh, Brutus Beefcake, my dad liked Brutus Beefcake, I want to go buy his autobiography.
Right. Will it still be out?
Yeah.
So yes and no. You may not be able to get it from me, mailing it to you out of my basement, which has become my distribution center. But it's intellectual property that's on Amazon that will continue to print. So right now, it only prints overseas out of Amazon as like a publisher. And there's a reason for that. So if you want me to talk a little bit on the formula that I've my formula of self-publishing is not really self-publishing. It's almost like publishing, but it's from a one-man show. So here's what I do. I print a bunch of them up. I give half the print run. Say we print like 2,000 to 5,000 on a print run. I'll send half of them to the wrestler. I've got half of them, the wrestler will sign autographed copies from their home, and they'll mail it out themselves to people who want an autographed copy, which is really neat because when we print a bunch of them up, not having that middleman, which is a publisher like ECW Press or No, I don't know about Crowbar, but ECW Press, more like Triumph, out of Chicago. Those guys they have employees, they have a physical location, they have overhead, they have distribution, and that's basically what they offer. So if you go to a small press, what they do is they mail the books out, and they also offer exposure. So they put it up on their website. They do little book fairs and things to get you over and stuff like that. But I've always argued this: the wrestler is going to get themselves over more than any small publisher could. Unless you're a big publisher, then that's something totally different. But a small press. So let us work on getting the stuff out ourselves. So me and the wrestler work on getting that out. We mail the books out ourselves. And I don't keep more than 2/3 of the book. I keep less than half. I keep like, it's all different. So, I might keep 1/3, but we flip flop it because what happens is usually a small publisher will keep 5/6 of the book. They'll give a little bit of money to the wrestler. Then they give a tiny bit of royalty on each book after that. So it's like an advance. They might make a couple grand, then they get a little bit of money off of each book. In this case, we print the book up ourselves, and it might cost us a couple bucks a book, $3-4 a book tops with shipping and everything like that. Then all the money goes to the wrestler, and even more because he's autographing them, and he has all the books at his disposal to do whatever he wants with. So if they're a hustler and they're good at these gimmick tables at shows, selling stuff, they could do a good job with the books. So it's really, what you make of it. But either way, it's their book, and they can print up as many as they want. And if I die and they outlive me, they still have part ownership with it. They can print up whatever they want. I'd tell them how to do it. And there's no middleman keeping the majority of the book. I'll give you another example. One of the guys, and I won't say who, but on the new COVID con, who I just told you today he's in, and I'm teaming him with Beefcake. I think that might change, but he has a book out. And whenever he buys a book, he has to buy them from the publisher, and he pays wholesale, which is about $13 a book. So to put a stack of books on his table, each book costs him $13. He sells it for $25. He makes another $12, $13 off of each book. But it only costs about $3 to print a book. So if we print them ourselves and put them on his table, he's going to make $10 more off of each book that he sells to cut out the middleman and mail them out yourself. So that's why I say to do it that way. I challenge everybody to figure out the best way to write the book along with the wrestler, do some kind of split or something that works best for both of them. And then you're not paying somebody else that may not need to be paid. Do you know what I mean? There's no reason to slam a publisher. But I don't think with wrestling, it's all that necessary for some guys because we can do it ourselves and the notoriety is already there. The fan base is there and they'll find them. I'm getting boring though, I think. So we should talk more fun stuff again. I could talk this publishing stuff for a long time.
Well, somebody said that, I think it's interesting. I mean, when the Beefcake book came out, I was like, I wonder if I can get this in a hardcover. Is that like an option ever, or
it is? But see, that's the thing. Okay, so in order to print a hardcover, and this is super geeky to go into this type of detail. All right, you need to print a lot of them to get the price low enough so that you could sell a hardcover and not pass on the cost to the fans. Okay, so while I print less books than a small publisher, we make way more money than if the wrestler went to the publisher. And this is why. Say that we wanted to put the books on the shelves at Barnes & Nobles. Barnes & Nobles will not buy my book unless how do I say this? Unless I sell it to a distributor, and a distributor is a third party. That third party takes a bunch of the boxes, puts them in a warehouse, okay, charges you rent for it to sit on a pallet, charges you for them to pull the book out of the that box when Barnes & Nobles wants one in Minneapolis. Then they mail it to you to Minneapolis. Then they charge you for the mailing out to to that Barnes and Nobles. Then that Barnes and Nobles gets the book and they take a cut of the book. Okay. So now the distributor's charging for all their fees plus the rent, and Barnes and Noble's taking their cut. There's only a little bit of money left. There's $1 or $2 left for you.
Right.
So I say, screw that. I'm just putting it on Amazon. You can't get my book at Barnes and Nobles, but when you get it at Amazon, I'm going to make 400 times the amount of money that I would make if I put it in hardcover, where I printed a bunch of them and also had it in Barnes and Nobles. So to the fan that wants it in hardcover and to the fan who wants it at Barnes and Nobles, I have to not offer that product, but then we make so much more, and it really helps the wrestler out. And that's kind of what all my projects are, to give the guys a better cut of the deal, that, than having to pay that $12 or $13 wholesale price on every book if they want to sell it at the gimmick tables. So,
okay.
So it's a decision I've made. I've only done one book where there was a different version of it, and it was for WrestleCon. It was Vader's book. We made a blood red cover, which was like more evil looking. So we released it at WrestleCon last year. It was last year? Yeah. Everything's a blur now, right?
The days blend together.
Yeah. So, but we made a variant cover for WrestleCon where we had the labels signed, and I signed them too, and you could get a special cover. So that's the only thing that I've done. But yeah, the hard covers would cost a lot more, and then I'd either be passing that cost on to the customer, or I would be eating big into what the wrestler could make or the amount of books we could print.
Right.
So that's why it doesn't exist. That's why I don't do it yet. And we may do it, but I haven't done it yet. And I think right now the formula that we have works. What I did forget to mention here, though, we kind of went on a tangent.
Yeah.
Say that I'm gone. Where's the book? It's on Amazon. It's set up right now. So if somebody orders it in America, I mail it out. Okay. Because I have a stack of books here to mail out. Or you could go to TitoSantana.com and get his book from his website where he signs it, which is super cool for collectors. Right. So there's the two ways to get it. The book is available in Italy. It's available in New Zealand. It's available in Australia and UK, everywhere. But what happens is Australia gets an order from Amazon, Australia, AU, and they print the book in Australia, and it has a different barcode on it. And then they mail it out to the fans. And then the fans who buy it don't have to pay $20 in postage from America to ship to Australia. They pay $2 or $3. So the way that I have mine set up is that there's a digital image of the book that overseas they'll print up quick, send it out. Right. So in the event I died, this is crazy to talk this way, but in the event I died, I could flip the switch and make America's turn on, and then somebody could take over the Amazon account, and then the book just keeps going on. Here's where that doesn't always work. Gary Hart's book. I don't know if you're familiar with this. We're really getting geeky again.
Well, the reason I was asking was because of I had mentioned to you the Dynamite Kid book. Yeah. I've been looking for it, and I feel like it's hard to find, and there's two different covers.
Yeah.
And I don't know which they might both be the same book.
I think they're the same. Yeah, but so there's a book that Gary Hart, the wrestler, put out, manager from World Class, the Von Erichs and all that. That book is worth I couldn't even tell you. I know it was at one point worth 400. I feel like it's worth 700 now or something like that. It's because the book isn't in a case like I said, it's not digital. I believe the company that owns it still has rights to it, but they don't want it out there, or the family doesn't want it out there, or something doesn't want it out there. So you can't get it now. And that's why it's super expensive like that. Maybe one day, the guy who helped write it, I think, was Court Bauer, the guy that runs Major League Wrestling, MLW. They got the Von Erich brothers there now and stuff. Anyhow, if they had that set up back in the day where they could just flip the switch and said, I bet you could still get it, and it wouldn't be like this super valuable rare book that it is now. People would still be buying it because Amazon could just turn it on and print one out. So that's the wave of the future, though. Amazon has created a platform now that authors like us can do this and ship in Australia without having me contacting a printer press out there and then contacting somebody to stuff the book in an envelope and then mail it to some bloke in, down under with a delivery. But
okay. All right. Well, we can talk about more fun stuff. So
yeah, was that boring? Guys, that was a good 10, 15 minutes of business boring crap.
Well,
and I could ask it a lot.
Look, somebody from Eric said he bought 7 books yesterday. So
you are a sweet, sweet man, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
But you're a mark for bile and all that. But I was right with you, and so was Ed probably buying a bunch of crap.
I think I got like 6 books so far. So, all right. Well, who did you like growing up when you were a kid? Besides Hogan, obviously everyone liked Hogan.
Funny, goofy stuff. Like I like comedy stuff, so I like the Mountie. I like Repo Man. I like Bastion Booger. I like ridiculous crap.
But you were watching before those guys, though.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay. So who would you have rooted for? Like 84, 85?
So Hogan was my dude when I was a kid. Did I tell you on the last show that I caught like one of his shirts?
Yeah,
I probably did. So I told you that story. Let me see. Also around that time would have been Junkyard Dog. The USA Express was Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. I would catch a little bit of NWA. It was funny because it was on, but I didn't really watch it that much. I was intrigued by it if I saw it on, but I didn't go out of my way to watch it. So I sort of like I liked Rick and Scott Steiner. They were the Varsity Club before that. Where they would wear these letters, and Mike Rotundo went over there for a bit, and they would wear like a varsity jacket of wherever they went to college or whatever. Kevin Sullivan was pretty cool. Let me see. That's really old. So 84, 83. Road Warriors probably. But I was more a WWE guy. So eventually it was, at least first, it was probably Demolition and then the Road Warriors, which was the backwards way. But yeah, so those are some of the guys that I liked early on.
I was a huge Big John Studd fan.
Yeah, Big John Studd was cool. But did you like him when he turned face in the won the Royal Rumble?
I liked him in the haircutting match. I liked him back when he was fighting Hogan.
Yeah.
I like
one of the books I wrote had Big John Studd stuff in it, and I remember Andre giving him a hard time. I don't remember if it was Tito's book.
I think it was the Brutus book.
It might have been. It might have been because it was Andre's stories, and they both had some Andre stories, and that's what it was related to. So Big John Studd, was trying to do big man stuff, and when he was on the same card as Andre, Andre would get pissed because that was kind of his gimmick. So he felt like someone was stealing his gimmick. He didn't like the fact that Big John Studd would step over the top rope, or he would do, some of the big no-sell stuff that big guys would do. So he would. I remember one of the stories. Jeez, I think it was Beefcake that told me, was that he'd get Big John Studd in the ring and kick the crap out of him, and Big John Studd would take off, and he would literally like pack his bags as he was like making it back to the locker room because he was afraid that Andre was going to kick his ass in the locker room, which Andre did do from time to time to different people. So, yeah, man, that's something.
if Andre was around today, 30-year-old Andre today, would he be the biggest star in wrestling, or would he not be allowed in wrestling? Like, would they just not use him?
I don't know. And I think that's because he was one of the big, I don't want to say freak of natures, but, different type looking wrestler. There wasn't that many huge monstrous guys like that. If you were to actually put him up against like the Big Show, who can actually talk and cut a really cool promo, I don't know who would win today. Like if he just came out of nowhere, and if you didn't, are we saying that Andre isn't the first, right? Because he wouldn't be if he's coming out today.
Right. No, that's true. Well, you're right. I guess so. But he just, looked like someone that you had to watch, right? I mean, he had that persona that he was an enigma.
Right. I would say if you look at a guy like Great Khali, very similar to Andre the Giant, right? Not like an acrobatic, not flashy, flippy floppy guy that you see on flippy floppy. Sounded like Jim Cornette. But like, not a great speaker, kind of slow, kind of monstrous, scary kind of guy, very, chops and body slams, how well did he fare? Not well. I mean, I like him. I'm actually a Great Khali mark. So when he come back, years later, and they do something with the Bollywood Boys or whatever their names were, the Singing Twins they changed their name to or whatever. I thought it was awesome that he came back, and maybe that's probably the kid in me seeing a little bit of Andre the Giant in that guy, because both guys are from another country, both speak our language as a first language, which made them more mystical. They're both huge. I always liked that gimmick, so if it's done well, and I think both of them did pretty well, right? But he didn't take off like Andre did, right? So I think that would be the answer. I don't think he would take off like he did.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, I feel like people ask, who's the biggest wrestling star of all time, and I think it's Andre the Giant.
Yeah, I almost want to go down and grab that poster, but you'd have to cut a promo or something if I did, because I got one of those Bearman posters, that Wildman poster.
Right.
It's Andre the Giant. This is a poster from like 1984. So we're talking.
Oh, really?
I'd have to take my headset off, and you'd have to count to 20 for me to go get it, though. If you want, I'll do it.
Yeah, I can do that. I can cut a promo here.
All right, cut a promo. I'll go get it.
Well, thanks. We appreciate everyone listening. Obviously, this is my show that I do. Let me ask you this: Kenny was nice enough to let us share on the Booksmark page. And Eric, thanks so much, man. For Eric, what books did you buy? If you're still listening, can you share with us what books you got? I myself went out and got the Missing Link book, a comic book. I got the Danny Davis book and the Kamala book. So I'm pretty pumped to be going on a reading spree over the next few weeks. Rob wants to know what's COVID kind of. Oh, I don't know, Rob.
All right, I'm back.
All right.
Yes, my wife got her hair done. She actually left.
Whoa.
Are we not supposed to talk about that? Oh, no, she didn't get her hair done. Not at all. She just got home. All right, so check this out. This is what I bought from COVID Con. This is the chic one. Let me see. How do I move that in there?
Now, is that a reprint or is that a legit?
No, this is legit. They're both really old. If you look at them, you can tell. So the Sheik did a lot of stuff out of Detroit.
Okay.
And he would bring talent and go to a lot of these Canadian shows.
Wow.
And this one has the bear.
Oh, the wrestling bear, yeah.
He had a few different bears. And let's see, I'll show you the Andre one. This is what we were just talking about. I just thought it was pretty cool. A little tiny bit faded. But
oh wow.
Look at that.
What year is this? What year is that from?
I think it's 83, 84, but it might even be older. I'm gonna have to look it up.
The wrestling that has to be older, right?
Maybe. It's old. You know what? I think it's 70 something. You're right. He told me what the year was. It's 74 or 78. So one of them was 74, one was 78. And they've got all like the gimmick stuff like Battle Royal, cage match, all kind, $1,000 to the winner. It's all these gimmick stuff. That's what the guy was known for. So pretty neat.
That's really cool.
You know who probably would mark out to that is your partner in crime at COVID, Rob the Slob. Because he's a Canadian, right?
Oh, that is true.
So in the Sabu book, he talks about one of his first matches up in the Canada area was for the Wildman as a promoter, and Sabu's uncle, who was kind of his father figure, was the Sheik, and from time to time they do a talent swap because they were sort of right over the border from Detroit, and Sabu was set to be on a card with Adrian Adonis, who you must have some kind of respect for, being that you're a Beefcake fan, right? Adrian Adonis helped propel Brutus Beefcake into the market.
Right behind.
All right, cool, nice. So Adrian Adonis had just left WWE. I think the deal was they thought he was out of shape, so he left for a bit. He went to Japan. He kind of lost some weight, started to look good again, had a big stack of cash. Went to work for the Wildman, and they got in an accident between shows on the same tour that Sabu was booked on, and they went off a cliff and what happened was they swerved. They were about to hit like a deer or something, or a moose, caribou or something up in Canada, and they went off the cliff. They crashed, and the wild man, bear man, Dave McKigney, he passed away right away, and there were two other guys in there, and they're on one of the cards here. They were called the Kelly twins. Super historical nerd stuff we're doing here, a little wrestling nerd action.
Wait, are you saying the wild man died in the same car accident as Adrian Adonis?
Yes.
Wow.
So the Kelly twins right here in the bottom, right here.
Yep.
Oops. These guys, they passed. I think one of them maybe made it. I'd have to look. Did you get the meat there? Yeah. Add that to it. It's good. My wife's eating some lasagna that I set aside for her when she was not out getting her hair done. Nice. So, yeah, they both passed, and they say, depending on who tells the story, that there was a ring truck behind. This is what Sabu says. There was a ring truck behind the car, and a couple of ring crew, and this is all alleged, went down to the car as it was sinking, and Adrian was in the back seat, and he's help, try to, and they pretty much took his luggage, which had the big stack of cash from Japan, because he just came from All Japan, robbed the guy, and just didn't call the ambulance and took off. And they say it's possible that if they had tried hard, they could have maybe saved Adrian's life, and they didn't, but they chose to keep his cash and boot. So that's why I wanted one of those posters, with Kelly Twins' name on it and stuff like that, because that story and the wild man is in Sabu's book. So that's kind of why I wanted one of those posters, because it was related to that. And I did a lot of research getting that story into Sabu's book in one of his first Canadian tours, and how Adrian died and all of this. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Now, when you're doing
a bummer, I guess it was a bummer.
No, that's it. I mean, I knew the story about how Adrian died, but I didn't really I didn't really know who the wild man was. But after COVID Con, now I do, and now it's like, wow, that's so weird. Like,
so even a little bit more with that guy Wes. I'd been on his page for a bit. I said to him, man, you're putting all these neat stories up here. We're seeing these posters. He said one day, if anybody wants, I'm thinking about taking pictures of all of my posters, and I'll send you a PDF of my collection. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm like, hook me up. And then I'm like, you know what, though? I was like, what if you could do this? And I challenged him. Write me a paragraph about each poster and what it means and what you know about it, or a story on it, or wherever you can, and we'll make a book, and I'll show you how to produce it, and I'm not going to throw it up on my site. He's going to make it his own publication. It's his own deal. But I challenged him and said, don't just put that. We'll have it. I'll show you how to bind it and get it all together, and we'll produce it. And he just took off on it. Now he's got pages and pages of research, and there's more than a paragraph about each poster. So he's making a big poster book, but with a story, like a long story about each poster, and a lot of stuff about the bear and stuff. And I did a little research on the bear man too. And so when he was interviewing, was it you that were interviewing Wes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So did I tell you, ask him if what happened to the girlfriend? I knew some stuff because I had put a little bit of the Sabu research,
right.
And I had heard that, one day the wild man came home and there's blood all over the place. Is because the bear went nuts and ate his girlfriend. It literally went crazy and destroyed it. I think they put the bear to sleep or whatever, whatever they did. So, but yeah, I knew little things from that research, but that guy's got tons of research on it. So his book's going to be cool when it comes out. That's why I wanted him on. That should be, maybe he'll have it out in 6 months or something like that. He's still working on it, but
no, that is, I mean, that obviously that's back in the day when it was a different world.
Oh yeah. Wild West, the wild west.
I'm fascinated how long. So you obviously your depth of knowledge is way more than mine. I mean, mine's 84 to 90, 92 maybe. But
okay.
But you were a fan from around that area. But then you got into it. That's how you know all these people, right?
Well, I probably what happened is we both watched at the same time, you and I.
Right.
I think. But when I got into the wrestling now, I started to work with the guys that were popular that we were watching on TV.
Yeah.
But they would tell stories from before that. So that's why I know older stuff like that. It's not that I watched it. I really didn't have a whole lot of that under my belt that I could see. So how old are you?
42.
So yeah, I'm a handful of years older than you. Not much, but a little bit. So I think I would predate you by world class. Like I got to see a little bit of the Von Erich stuff, which was probably
okay.
yeah. So I would see Kevin Von Erich and Kerry Von Erich and Freebirds and all of that, and we would see him later on as Texas Tornado and Doc Henry and whatever else. Missing Link came over to WWF for a bit. But yeah, if I did shows with some of these guys and you would ride with them to another show, they would tell stories about different people that they trained with. And that's what, I would hear a story like that from Sabu about how Adrian passed. I had never heard that anywhere before. You know what I mean?
Right.
I bet you that'll become a Dark Side of the Ring special at some point. It's gotta, right? They got all the other stuff up
I
there.
I thought in one of them that there was like a brief clip about Adrian.
Yeah, maybe then.
I don't know which one it was in, but I think that I forgot which one it was in. But I think that there was an interview with his. I thought there was an interview with his wife, with his ex-wife, with his wife.
A handful. I need to watch them honestly, but I know stories, so I don't like bother.
I know.
I watched the Bruiser Brody one, which I thought was excellent. I thought that was really good. Bruiser Brody. I watched the Montreal Screwjob one because Vader was talking about that in his book a little bit. Hold on just a second. So when I cook lasagna, making that extra sausage, is that good? Like to add it like it's that? Good, yeah. I'm going to do that again next time. I just thought just totally like breaking character. My wife's sitting right here now. Yeah. And she's eating lasagna. And what I did was I bought a cheap frozen lasagna, big one, like a
Mrs. Casanova
Walmart jobber, threw it in there. But then I bought ground sausage and mixed spaghetti sauce in it, Prego, and mixed it up and made it so you could have a whole bunch of extra sausage on the side with lasagna. And it looks really good to watch her eat it, even though I already ate some earlier before she got home. Yeah. All right.
I can't. I'm not having lasagna until like the end of July.
I know this, and you're doing good. So what did you say? You lost like 7 or 8 pounds?
I'm down 8 pounds since COVID con. Yeah.
This is Eddie. This isn't Rob the Slob. This is the other guy. He's on in the morning. He's down 7 or 8 pounds. He's doing good. Now I go the other direction, man. We're sitting here eating like frozen burritos and stuff like that. So
no, it can it happen. You know how it is. It can happen quick when there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
So my next question was going to be: so you grew up in New York, right?
Well, I grew up in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. Okay.
Yeah, I moved to New York in my sophomore year in high school.
Wait, so did you have the luxury of watching the WWF on MSG?
No, Boston Gardens. Because when I was younger, I went to Boston.
Right.
I was in the Boston area, so I did go MSG. I saw one show at MSG.
But did you have like the MSG channel?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
okay.
I did get that. So yeah, we did see some, and those were very odd because you would see a show with no commentary. Like when I was young, there would be a show, there'd be no commentary at all sometimes, and it would just be like a match, or 2 or 3 matches, and it would be there. There was like once in a while there'd be a weird commentary team of like the Duke of Dorchester, Pete Doherty, and
with Monsoon, right? That's
something like that. Yeah,
I usually got him and Monsoon. Or Lord Alfred Hayes and Monsoon.
So I've seen some of those, but I saw a few that had no commentary whatsoever. And this was early on. And Boston Gardens was where I would go and see them live. That's a new one. Cool.
But the matches at MSG were always fascinating because they'd always have like 4 tag teams, but they would split them all up and have 4 singles matches.
And I got a story with that too. How did that work? Because I wasn't there though. I was at Binghamton, New York, and where I saw this. And this would have been, I can tell you the year, 87. Yep, 87. There he is. So he's catching up. So he said, yes, I would. So he marked out to the posters. That's what it has to be.
Yeah.
All right. So, but yeah, you're right. It was like, let me think a second. Yeah. So it was Bret Hart versus Brian Blair, and then Jim
Right.
the Anvil Neidhart versus Jumpin' Jim Brunzell. Like that's what they would do, right?
Yes.
So I was sitting with my dad, kind of up in the cheap seats. We would get like the first level, not the nosebleed, but like the first level up. And off to the side was a little area, and the wrestlers would come out and watch some of the match right where we were. And it was cool because they still kayfabe, so they would watch, and if they knew that the fans could see them, they would act concerned that their guy was losing. So they were actually putting a little show on here in the corner just for the couple of us that could see them.
Right.
And I remember Jumpin' Jim Brunzell doing something, a reverse atomic drop to Bret the Hitman Hart. And you know that like is to hit the balls, right? You know, the reverse atomic drop, you pick the guy up, bang, knee to the, you know, the groin. So we saw that, and we looked quick down to Jim the Anvil, who had been watching a little bit. He's like, oh, he sees that he's selling it, right? We don't realize it. We think he's really upset. We're like, oh, like that's your lover out there, you know. And as a kid, we made these gay jokes, and it was more acceptable in the 80s. You don't do that now at all, absolutely not. But we'd be like, oh, that's your man, that's your boy out there. Look what they did to him. You can't have fun tonight. We would make, you know, the kids would say rude stuff, and Jim the Anvil would be like, oh, and get all mad and sell it. You know, so it was a little show going on. I remember seeing all that. People are yelling at him, gay jokes and stuff like this. And Tony Atlas came out. Now, so Tony Atlas was face and Jim the Anvil was heel. And Tony's like, Jim the Anvil's ready to come at us, like kill us. And Tony, you know, is holding him back. Like, no, brother, you're going to get yourself hurt. You're going to get yourself in trouble. You're going to go to jail. You know, don't do it, brother. So whole big thing going on. I remember thinking as a kid, this is real. I mean, like, but it couldn't have been. In hindsight, now that we know what it meant, they just put on a little show for us down in the corner because, like, you know, this little area could see it, you know. So, you know, hats off to WWE making me remember that as a kid and thinking he's very concerned over what just happened to his partner out there. And he gets mad when the fans, like, insinuate that's his lover in the ring. You know,
right.
So.
No, that is good. I used to go to the house shows in New Haven, and I always thought, you know, when you're 6, I'm like, oh, I think we're on Superstars of Wrestling. I'd always bring signs and you know, start thinking I'd look for myself on the next Saturday on TV because I didn't know how it worked.
Yeah, and the funny thing is you probably saw the exact same match that you saw at the house show, and it would be on TV, and you're looking for yourself, but that's only because they would work the same match at every city that they went to, and they would perfect it. So
I used to think that every show was like recorded. Yeah, and then they would just randomly select a show to show on Saturday. And I'm like, oh, maybe this will be the week that we'll be on TV.
So a funny thing that happened to me was during the period of time where they were between Hogan and almost between Bret Hart, they didn't really know exactly what they were going to do with like who the big name was going to be. And they even say that Tito was in the runnings at that time a little bit. Like he had a shot at being the next big guy because he was loyal to the company and all. I would come with a couple of my buddies, one of them being that guy, Sweet Pete. We would make signs that would put over the jobbers. Like there was a guy named Tony DeVito. There's another guy named Nick Barbary. There's another guy, Glenn Ruth. Who was the other one? Tony Roy was another one. So we would have signs with the jobbers' names on it. Right. And the jobbers, actually, some of them started to later on when I got into the wrestling, they remembered that I had signs of them. And I even kept the signs, and they would say, dude, it was awesome. You know, I tell them, hey, I had a sign of you, and I would come to the shows and I would hold, I remember that, you know, I was doing a dark match for WWE and you had to sign up. So we also made ref signs, and we also made ring announcer signs, and we would hold them up. And there was one ring announcer named Bill Dunn, and he was so amused that we would do it every time that we were there that he came over to me and said, do you want to do a guest ring announcer spot? And I'm like, oh, yeah. So he let me come in the ring, gave me a card of what to say, and I announced for Owen Hart versus Ahmed Johnson. I also did another one, Owen Hart versus Phil Apollo. He let me come in the ring and announce a match. Oh, that's great. And said it was going to be on Superstars. Like you said, you're waiting to see yourself on Superstars. And now I'm coming around to that story now. So I waited for weeks saying, oh, geez, I got to see myself on TV, on Superstars. I can't wait, you know? And it didn't show. I even called WWE and said, I pretended to be my dad, which is funny. I was like, hello, my name is so-and-so, and you had my son on, and I'm very anxious to see him. I'm hoping that he still made the cut and will be on a match. They said he's coming. He'll be on at some point, and eventually I was. And I was super happy. And there's a videotape of it out there somewhere. And I was also on a one of the Coliseum videos as like a guest ring announcer. And the funny thing is, though, is that they cut all kinds of stuff out of sequence when they put the shows back together back then, because it wasn't all live. They would sit in a studio, they'd move some things around. So when my match is coming up and I'm announcing Owen Hart, I'm like, and from Canada, Owen the Rocket Hart or whatever. So they cut to a clip of the audience all cheering or booing, right? There they were booing. And I'm in the audience booing, but I'm also in the ring announcing, and they didn't realize. So I have like 2 appearances, and that other cut is me in the audience because they took another point in that night and cut it in to get more boos on the screen. So that blew my mind too as a kid. How could I possibly be ring announcing, but also being over there? Like I was like, oh, they cut it out of sequence. They found a better tape of people booing and put it right here. And that's when I learned a little bit about the audience sweetening, which they still do today. Like if you watch AEW and they put the wrestlers around the ring and they're cheering a little bit and they're making it more exciting, there's also a tiny bit of canned audience cheers and screaming in there to make it even sound like more than the dozen or so people that are there.
Yeah.
That is a practice that they still do today. If you were, or still do last year when there was actual audiences, they would pipe in more audience, so taking sounds and making it sound better than it was. So it was similar to that, but it was visual.
Did they have to do that in the 80s, do you think, or no?
Not in the 80s, probably not as much so, but they did at this point that I'm telling you about, because we were, they say wrestling is cyclical, and like it's real high and then it goes low, and it was a really low point. This is before the click.
Okay.
This is before, what do they call it? The new generation, next generation. Do you remember when it was blue with yellow, the logo?
Maybe.
I think it was called the next generation. It was before that. So it was like right after Hogan left, and they really didn't have a whole, Yokozuna was the champ for a little bit or something, you know? So it was like 94 maybe. So yeah. Oh
yeah, that was like the year where they had like a huge departure of talent, right? Where it was like Hogan, Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah. So come 94, 95, everything kind of started to suck. Now I have a pinball machine you saw downstairs.
Yep.
From COVID Con, we did a quick little spot where I was jumping in. Who's that jumping? John Crowther's spot, because he jumped in mine, and I'm playing pinball. That's from 1994. So it has Bret the Hitman Hart, and it has Hogan, and so it's right as Hogan was leaving and Bret was coming in. But it's got like Razor as a heel on it. So it's a really weird time. It's a real transitional time. It's got a little bit of the old guys and a little bit of the new guys coming in. So it's a neat pinball machine because it represents a little of both. But so that's one of my coolest things that my wife let me buy.
Pinball machine?
Yeah, full pinball machine. Big arcade one, yeah.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Obviously you got Hogan's shirt at Saturday Night's Main Event, right?
Yeah. So we talked about it. I think that was versus the Funk Brothers.
So here's my question for you. Was that real? Was that at midnight?
No.
When you went to the show?
It was taped, and but it was off a few hours. So I feel like it was not midnight. I was definitely not there at midnight. But I feel like it was earlier in the day. And I remember going in and sitting down, and we were right behind where the commentators were. And I want to say it was Jesse and Vince. And I almost feel like I can remember what Jesse was wearing, like a pink tuxedo with, I don't know, some weird clothes, right? And I remember watching him, and he did this nervous thing with his leg that a lot of people do, where you just kind of, your legs go, it's just kind of like bouncing his leg a little bit. And I'm watching, I'm like, I wonder why he does that. And I realized later in years I did the same thing. I don't know what it was really, but I looked over his shoulder and I could see them over and over again. I could see Paul Orndorff is like flexing, and he had like it was Adrian Adonis had a Paul Orndorff stand, like a cardboard stand, and would come up behind it and look over the bicep and do some of the gimmick where was trying to make Orndorff uncomfortable, like the gold dust kind of gimmick. And they reshot that over and over again. And I could see it in the monitor before the show was even, they were kept doing it. And I could see it. And I'm like, they're practicing that. They're doing something, but they're practicing because it's over and over and over again. And I'm pointing it out to my dad, and he was like, oh, they're probably the lighting or whatever. He didn't know what was going on, but we could see that it was happening over and over again. And that was like one of the first times I remember thinking to myself, something's not quite right there, because that looks rehearsed. Like I could see it right in the monitor. We were so close,
right?
You know? So,
yeah, I think in Brutus's book, you talk about how he had to come out and reshoot the ending of a match.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how I would feel if I was at a show and I had to watch that.
You know, I think they would typically do it in such a way, though, that you didn't quite realize that's happening. And the same type of story is also in a new book that I'm working on for Just Incredible.
Okay.
He had worked with, I want to say it was Mantar. Let me think for a second. No, it was Brooklyn Brawler. So it was Aldo Montoya versus the Brooklyn Brawler. And what happened was Aldo Montoya it was just debuting, Just Incredible, with this yellow, they call it a jockstrap type mask over his face. And he wasn't accustomed to wearing a mask, and he was having a hard time breathing with it. So he blew up during the match, meaning he couldn't catch his breath. And when the finish came, it was a mess. It didn't look good. He went back to the locker room, and then Vince was like, "You're doing it again. You're going back out. Finish it. Do the." So they went back out, and instead of doing all the spots again, they just went out and brawled. And then they went into the finish, and then the finish was the same as what it should have been, but it didn't look right, so no one really knew what it was. So they were able to cut it up, and then they repieced it together. They took the finish from the second time around, cut it into the other one, and you didn't realize live that had happened. And at home, you didn't realize that the finish was botched, because it wasn't. It was the second piece. So same thing with Beefcakes. I forget what match that is now, because there's a few books ago now.
Yeah. By the way, Brutus has probably the nicest autograph in the history of autographs.
Like a chick drew it, right? That's what I always thought. It's so fancy and
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's not his wife's though. She doesn't do it. I mean, I've seen him do it live. It's very round and fancy. He's done it a million times, but you're right. It's a super nice looking autograph. It's very, very nice if you like that type of thing and you appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could sign my name like that. I've practiced a million times. It just never happened.
Funny thing, when I signed mine, ever since I started in 93, 94, I would write Kenny and then Casanova. Now, so it was C-A-S. The next A in the middle was always an upside down A, and then Nova. And I stole that from Kamala's Hasbro card, because it had a signature to it, and they always drew the A upside down, and I thought that was the coolest thing as a kid. So I stole that even before I worked with him as Kimchi, which turned out to be kind of like ironic that I would be known for writing my first book through Kamala, and I had a piece of his autograph in my autograph, if that makes sense.
Right.
So kind of weird, but
all right, a few more questions before I let you get out of here. Do you think that people can use wrestling in other industries, like the psychology of it? And I'll give you an example, because a lot of people that don't understand how it works, but I was at a company where, somebody who was more established than me, I'm in sales.
Yep.
And we basically had worked on a deal together. Now, this is someone who's been in the company, wasn't worried about losing their job or anything like that. So I said to the guy, I'm like, this would be a really good spot for you to put me over. I've only been there a couple months.
Yeah.
And he decided not to, and didn't understand why that would have been a good time to do that for me. And I'm like, I feel like more people should learn how that works, because it really can help elevate everyone within, your organization, if you took that, those psychology spots from wrestling.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. And I can't think of who said it recently. I listened to a podcast where they talked about, I think it was a Conan podcast, and I feel like it was Disco Inferno talking. I don't know if you ever listened to that podcast. It's pretty good. Called not Killing Town. Keeping It 100.
No, but I will. Okay.
Yeah. It's really good. Keeping It 100 is really good. It's Conan and Disco Inferno. And Disco Inferno is super old school, and a lot of what he says is really true, but he's sort of like heel while he says it, but it's good stuff that he says. It's like really good psychology type stuff that he always comments on. And I think he recently read some politician book, or maybe a doctor book or psychologist book, where they kept referencing wrestling stuff because the guy was also a wrestling fan. And he said it was really neat to hear other people say how you could, work the public, or like used wrestling psychology, kind of stuff to, like, Donald Trump, going on Twitter and cutting promos on people and staying over, but he's playing a heel, but then people side with the heel. So same as maybe Mayweather does, or some UFC stars have borrowed that and brought it into. So like kayfabe type stuff is bled now into other avenues, including medical world, political world, other sporting, worlds and stuff. So yeah, totally what you're saying. And there's a guy, Kevin Kleinrock was in our last COVID con. He does like lucha stuff. He sells a lot of like masks and stuff for the guys. He gets the licensing and helps a lot of luchadors do some cool stuff. And he plugged a guy to me, maybe not for this one, but for the next one, a guy named Houston Curtis. I had to look the name up because I just talked to him today. Houston Curtis, who had a little bit of his feet in wrestling. But he made a transition over to like Hollywood producer, and he's also a big time like poker player, like 6-figure, 8-figure betting poker player, like big bucks because he's a rich guy or something like that. And,
was he in the movie Molly's Game?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know who that is.
His name's Houston Curtis, so he'll probably be on our next Whatever We Do.
Really?
Yeah. So he's got a book out. And it's mostly about his gambling stuff, but he talks about exactly what you're saying, how he took some wrestling elements and worked them into his Hollywood stuff, and also his betting, his gambling. So, I mean, if you're good at working a crowd and making them feel a certain way, and getting them to trust you, and then pulling a swerve and saying, this kind of stuff. I think he makes a connection, or he will make a connection at COVID Con, and how he was able to take that his wrestling background and use it in other avenues of life to be successful. So, I mean, I do it some too. Like when I left wrestling to take on more DJing stuff, like I said, the emotional roller coaster, my playlists intentionally might be fast, fun, throwback, bring them down, bring them back up. Like I'm conscious of different things like that, almost like ring psychology, but then it becomes playlist dance psychology, or also how to work the mic and how to keep people energetic, but not steal heat from a bride and groom. These are all terms that you use in wrestling,
right,
but it makes sense. I may never have thought before it's probably not the best move to tell jokes and try to make myself really look good at a wedding if I didn't think as a manager I shouldn't steal heat from the wrestler in the ring and make people look at me when they're working a tough spot, right? Or put myself over when my real role is to make the wrestlers look good. So that's what I brought over to DJing, is my real role is to give the bride her day and make her look good, and not keep people looking at me, but making them all look at her. So there are ways definitely that wrestling can move over into other avenues of industries and make you a success. So
is it easier to be successful as a heel or a face, do you think, in wrestling?
It's funny. Somebody said something the other day. One of the girl managers had a post, pictures of me up there, and it said, was this the first time you managed face? And it wasn't, but it was one of the first times that I did it regularly and kind of understood how to do it, because being a face manager usually it sucks for people, because you can't, your goal is much easier attainable if you want people to boo you. You do stuff to piss them off. To get them to like you is something different. So like
Only
when
one
they,
I think of is Captain Lou with the Bulldogs.
yeah, and like, what's the point of that anyhow? Usually, because as a baby face, they're gonna, you don't really need a mouthpiece, because usually the mouthpiece is there to be your advocate and make you look like a bad guy and make people hate them through talking and saying horrible things. But as a face, you put the guy over and say, I'm going to try my hardest tonight, but I think I can beat him, but if you get behind me, I can do it. It's the face promo is much easier than the heel one, making them hate you. But as a manager, man, being a face, like, you don't know what to do, because you're not really supposed to cheat outside of the ring, right? You're supposed to just clap. You're cheerleading.
Right.
So, and if you do cheat, it has to be in a fun way, that the audience would like it, and I've seen a few people pull that off his face, where they would cheat, like early on, like Roddy Piper was good at it. Shawn Michaels, when he immediately turned face right after he had brought in Diesel, and I think he turned face right after that. There were some funny spots, and so you kind of work humor into the cheating that would make it acceptable, or as a revenge piece. Once I figured all that psychology out, as far as being an independent manager, I think people said that I did it really well. And also, I had a funny, goofy character, and I would sing karaoke, and which later turned into my DJing stuff, which I think we talked about before. But that made me more likable and more cartoony. So I did it well, and people liked the Kenny Casanova character. But most people don't like being a face manager. So let's see, depends on the person. I think heel was always easier for me. Yeah. So the lines of players, yeah. So now they are, but back then they weren't as much. In the early, in the '90s, we're still talking some old school stuff was still there a little bit. And like you said, Captain Lou was cool. They were keeping him around, but a face manager is not really needed, and it's tough to do. I think. I think I did it all right, though. People tell me I did it pretty well. So I did.
Are you surprised that? So obviously, politics is a really subject that can get people like really pissed off. Are you surprised, because I am, that that Vince didn't have a character that was like huge Trump fan, just to like get or the opposite, just to like get, piss off the crowd or whatever? Are you surprised that they didn't go down that road?
I don't know that. I think it's so polarizing now that if you were to do it, and maybe even the wrestler themselves wouldn't feel comfortable doing it, because it would mean less T-shirts, it would mean less merchandise. So I think they stay away from that, and that's why you hear that. And
you think they would have in like the early '80s done that?
Well, and they probably did to some degree, right? But now Vince is part of the whole Trump thing, right? His wife has some kind of she's small business, and he's got something now. I don't remember what it is, but he got something recently. I heard he's doing something. I don't think they would, but probably because they probably lean more that direction, But like you said, back in the day, I don't know.
Well, because they had the Volkov and Sheik stuff, which I thought went over pretty well back then.
Yeah. So
and Kirshner, right? Corporal Kirshner.
Right. So a lot of that stuff was more us versus them, though.
Right.
But if you're talking to divide politics, you're dividing your audience that's sitting there, so you won't get a clear cheer or a clear boo, because it's 50-50. And back then it probably wasn't even we weren't divided as a nation like we are now. So I'm trying to think of political stuff that they did. It was more, I wouldn't say Republican, Democrat. It was more upper class versus lower class. So you had Ted DiBiase with everybody's got a price. So that's a little bit of that. But I mean, I can see what you're saying now. And the only person I could think that did it, some lucha thing, they do, what's his name? Drake?
I thought I read about a guy, in Mexico,
Trump,
maybe?
Yeah. And it was Eli Drake from Impact.
Okay.
I forget what he was called. Like Trump Jr. or like something like that. And he got massive heat because, going down to Mexico and saying you're a Trump.
Right.
With the whole wall thing, that's not going to go over. And he did it. I think it got massive heat. But you got to be careful, too, especially if you're going overseas and stuff.
I mean, could that that wouldn't ruin a career. Would that ruin a career doing something like
that? Today, I don't think.
Okay.
Because people know it's a character, right? But It could make you, because especially like Mexico though, they still believe it some down there. I hear Conan talk about that a lot when I listen to his podcast, that those fans, as far as like believing in this stuff, sometimes they'll like stab a guy in Mexico, even more so in Puerto Rico.
Right.
Both of those areas, they still sort of believe down there a little bit more than we do here. They think some of it's still real. They might go, "Oh yeah, I know it's fake, but that guy's real," that kind of thing.
Right.
So,
all right. Well, anything about COVIDCon? I mean, any announcements? When's the big announcement going to be?
I just got to write the schedule up a little bit more here, but I mean, I'll tell you a little bit of what I know for people that are paying attention. This long in the game, they deserve something. We're an hour and a half in here. We got Eric Bischoff, it seems, talking to Guy Evans, the guy that wrote the Nitro book. So they'll do a little back and forth. I think it's Beefcake and Hacksaw. We'll have Psycho Sid versus Leap and Lanny. We're doing factions this time. A couple of people mixed up, those are some of the names, some of the wrestler names. We've got JJ McGuire with John Cosper. And JJ McGuire was Jimmy Hart's guitarist. So whenever you heard any of the early stuff, like the Demolition theme and any almost all of the more rock sounding songs, not the Jim Johnston stuff that were very keyboard oriented, but the rock sounding songs were Jimmy Hart with this other guy, JJ McGuire, and John Cosper wrote his book with him. The guitarist. So he also played some for the Gentrys, which was Jimmy Hart's rock band from Memphis. So he'll be on early. We got the Fight TV president. His name's Mike Weber. He used to be Bruce Pritchard's boss in WWE. They'll be opening up with, who else is in that? Bill Apter, June 14th. So Sunday night, I'll be like crazy again. So let's see. So we got a little spot with Michael Kingston where he'll have some of his comic book people in with him doing a little panel. We got the Nikita Brezhnev with Evan Ginsberg, maybe another guy. I think we have Demolition debuting their coloring book with Peter Bregman and myself. I wrote it.
Okay.
Yeah, and we talked a little about that last time, that we have the Mick Foley one out, and now the Demolition one's coming out. That one's called Demolition on Mars. It's like a spoof of the old sci-fi comic books, and Demolition goes up against crazy stuff. It's like cybernetic zombie headhunters, I think is what it is. Like they're all over planet Mars, and they're trying to rescue somebody, a distress call. I won't spoil the story, but so that'll be a fun one. John Crowther has a faction that has Shockmaster, Cousin Luke, and I think one of the Glow Girls. Not the one that we did, but a different one, Janine Desone.
Yep.
So those are some of them off the top of my head. And just so you know, because you'll be one of the moderators, we're adding an hour or two because I couldn't fit them all. So we're bumping it back. We're bumping it back to 2:00, I think, instead of 4. Because what happened was before we had Eric Bischoff, I asked a few other people and they didn't get back to me. And then all of them got back to me like at the same time, and I didn't want to tell them no. So now I had a bunch of talent. So we had too much talent, but that's fine. I mean, the audience will like it. And we wanted to do factions where it's a couple of people together. So that's cool. But I couldn't fit everybody in the same block. So we had to bump it back an hour or two and add it. We went from 8 segments to 12 segments, I think. So it'll be like 2. It'll be 2 to 10 now instead of 4 to 10, I think.
That sounds like it's going to be a pretty fun day.
Yeah, it'll be cool. We also have a PWI spot that it may change. A PWI history, which will have Stu Sachs, the main editor, the owner, and his old partner who left Pro Wrestling Illustrated back in like the 60s and became like the front runner. Big name for Ringling Brothers Circus. He left wrestling and went to a circus, which I think is awesome. He became Ringling Brothers Circus. So I have a little bit with PWI there. So yeah, there's a bunch of cool stuff, and but it'll be a little bit less time consuming. It'll be like an afternoon and evening. And it's quite possible, we're still working on, maybe there'll be and we won't have a lot to do with it, but there may be a group pitching in for us and doing autograph signings virtually. So you would pay like $30. You can get a link. You would go on the screen with the wrestler for a couple of minutes. They sign a picture, and then the picture will be mailed to you. So we're working on that now. That's the next step to this virtual wrestling online thing, is piecing that together. And we've talked about it, how to do it to nauseam, you and I and Rob the Slob. And I just said, Rob, call the other people and see what they can do. I don't want to be bothered with that. Plus, I don't know that we would want to moderate it because it's a whole nother day of stuff.
Right.
But, it may be in the morning, though. I think that might be the way to go, is to put it Sunday morning, autograph signing. And that, so it's all on one day. But that 9 to like 2 won't involve us. It would be, those other guys we talked to. They might run it for us. That's probably the way to do it. But.
Yeah, I mean, either way, it's going to be a fun event. So what do you think? We're going to have another announcement, I'm assuming, right, that we'll put out to everybody coming.
Yeah, so I'll put up a flyer again. We'll want to put it all around, and you can plug it all. But that's basically the names that I think that are all going to be on there, is what I just said. 1 or 2 of those may not manifest, but they've all now said they are. So I think I'm safe to put together a package, send it to Fight TV. They'll pop it up and they'll plug it for a couple of weeks, and then we'll be good to go.
Card subject to change.
Yeah. So if one guy says he doesn't want to do it, but they all said yes. But if something doesn't happen, it's okay, because they all said yes when I thought only I was going to get one.
Right. Yeah. No. Great job as usual. All right, cool. Kenny. Well, listen. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Good time as usual.
Yeah.
And
so hope I didn't bore you with the publishing stuff. That always bores me, but people like to hear it. But I don't know.
I like seeing how the sausage is made. That, to me, that's good stuff.
Yeah. All right.
All right, man. Well, we'll see you at COVIDCon.
All right. See you later. Thanks.
All right. Take care, everybody.